Listen carefully. Love is not just about what someone says. It's about what they avoid saying, what they hide, and what they change. Because sometimes the truth doesn't come out in confessions. It comes out in patterns, in excuses, in repeated words. And today, we're breaking down 6 phrases that should make you pause, reflect, and protect your heart. You're overthinking. That phrase sounds harmless on the surface, but when it's repeated again and again, it can slowly chip away at your confidence and your sense of reality. It's often used not to comfort you, but to silence you. Instead of addressing your concern, he dismisses it. Instead of offering clarity, he turns the focus back on you, making you question your own instincts. Think about it. You bring up something that doesn't feel right. Maybe it's a sudden change in behavior, a late reply, a strange vibe you can't quite explain. Instead of saying, let me explain, or I understand why you feel that way, he quickly shuts it down with your overthinking. That's not reassurance. That's avoidance. Over time, this pattern can make you feel like your emotions are invalid. You start second-guessing yourself. You wonder if you're being too sensitive, too emotional, too much. And that's exactly where the problem begins. Because a healthy relationship doesn't make you doubt your sanity. It gives you peace of mind. When someone genuinely cares, they don't mind explaining things. They don't get defensive when you ask questions. They understand that trust is built through transparency, not dismissal. But when someone is hiding something, even small questions can feel like threats to them. So instead of answering, they deflect. They make you the problem. Pay attention to how you feel after hearing those words. Do you feel understood or do you feel small? Do you feel closer to the truth or further away from it? Your emotional response is not random, it's information. It's your inner voice trying to guide you. There's a difference between overthinking and observing patterns. Overthinking creates fear without evidence. But noticing repeated inconsistencies, changes in behavior, or emotional distance, that's awareness. And awareness is not your enemy, it's your protection. You are allowed to ask questions. You are allowed to seek clarity. You are allowed to feel secure in your relationship. Anyone who makes you feel guilty for wanting honesty is not protecting your feelings. They're protecting their secrets. I need space is a phrase that can sound mature, calm, and even healthy at first glance. And yes, in real relationships, space is important. Everyone needs time to breathe, reflect, and handle personal life. But what matters is how and when that space is used. Because sometimes this simple line becomes a cover for emotional withdrawal, secrecy, or even disconnection that is never properly explained. When a man truly needs space, he communicates it with clarity and respect. He doesn't leave you guessing. He doesn't disappear emotionally while expecting you to stay available. He doesn't create confusion and then call it space. Instead, he explains what he needs, why he needs it, and how it will affect the relationship. That kind of space brings understanding, not anxiety. But when I need space starts appearing suddenly, repeatedly, or without any real context, it can create distance that feels unsettling. You may notice that the conversation becomes shorter, the replies slower, and the emotional connection weaker. He is still present, but not truly present. And that difference is something you can feel even if you can't fully explain it. The danger is not space itself, it's unanswered space. When someone steps back but refuses to communicate, your mind is left to fill in the gaps. And those gaps often get filled with doubt, confusion, and fear. You start wondering if you did something wrong, if he lost interest, or if there is someone else involved. The silence becomes louder than the words. In healthy love, space does not create insecurity. It creates growth. It does not feel like punishment. It feels like understanding. You don't feel shut out. You feel reassured that the connection is still intact. But when space becomes a pattern of emotional escape, it slowly weakens trust without any clear explanation. You have to pay attention to consistency. Is he taking space to improve himself in the relationship, or is he using it to distance himself from accountability? Because real intention is always followed by clarity. Confusion, on the other hand, often hides what words cannot express openly. "She just a friend" is one of the most common lines that can sound completely normal in the beginning, but becomes emotionally confusing when trust is already shaky. Friendships are a natural part of life, and no healthy relationship should be built on insecurity or unnecessary control. However, what matters is not just the words being said, but the behavior that follows them. When a man is truly honest and has nothing to hide, this phrase comes with openness. He doesn't get defensive. He doesn't rush to shut down your concerns. He is willing to show transparency in his interactions because he understands that trust is not built on secrecy. It is built on clarity. You feel included, not excluded. You feel reassured, not replaced. But when this line is used repeatedly in moments where your concern is valid, it can start to feel like a shield rather than an explanation. Instead of addressing why something feels off, the conversation gets redirected. Instead of understanding your emotions, your concern gets labeled as jealousy or insecurity. That shift is important to notice because it moves the focus away from behavior and places it entirely on your reaction. A healthy partner doesn't make you feel guilty for asking questions. They don't force you to silence your intuition. They understand that trust grows when both people feel safe to communicate openly about anything, even uncomfortable topics. But when someone becomes overly defensive or avoids details, it can create emotional distance that feels hard to ignore. It's also important to understand that your intuition is not random. Sometimes you don't have proof, but you have patterns. You notice changes in tone, attention, or emotional availability. You sense when energy shifts, and while intuition alone is not evidence, it is often the first signal that something deserves clarity, not dismissal. A strong relationship doesn't survive on blind trust. It survives on honest communication. If everything is truly innocent, there's no reason for secrecy, tension, or avoidance. The more secure the bond, the easier it becomes to talk about anything without fear or defensiveness. "I've just been busy" is one of the most commonly used phrases in modern relationships, and on the surface it sounds completely reasonable. Everyone has responsibilities, work, family, personal stress, and life pressures. Nobody is available every second of the day. But what separates honesty from emotional distance is not the phrase itself, but the consistency behind it. When someone genuinely cares, being busy never becomes a barrier to connection. Even in the busiest schedules, there is effort. A quick message, a brief check-in, or a simple acknowledgement shows that you are still a priority, even if time is limited. Real love doesn't always require long conversations, but it always requires presence in some form. The problem begins when busy becomes the only explanation for repeated emotional unavailability. At first, you may understand it. You may give space, assume stress, or believe it's just a temporary phase. But over time, patterns start to matter more than promises. When days turn into silence, when effort becomes rare, and when communication only happens on his terms, it creates emotional imbalance. You start noticing the difference between being truly busy and being emotionally distant. A busy person still tries. A disconnected person excuses. A busy person communicates. A disconnected person disappears and reappears without accountability. And that inconsistency slowly affects how secure you feel in the relationship. What makes this phrase even more powerful is how it can silence your concerns. When you try to express that you miss communication or feel neglected, the response often becomes, "I told you I'm busy." That ends the conversation without actually addressing the emotional need behind it. Over time, your feelings get minimized and you begin to adjust your expectation instead of expressing them. But love should not require you to shrink your emotional needs. If someone values you, they make space for you, not just physically, but emotionally too. Because at the end of the day, it's not about how busy someone is. It's about how they choose to show up for you, even in the middle of their busyness. "Why don't you trust me?" is a phrase that often sounds like an innocent emotional question, but in many situations, it shifts the entire focus of the conversation. Instead of addressing the concern that was raised, the attention is redirected toward your reaction. Suddenly, you are not talking about behavior anymore. You are defending your feelings. And that is where emotional confusion can begin. In a healthy relationship, trust is not demanded through words. It is built through consistent actions, honesty, and emotional safety. When a person feels misunderstood or questioned, the natural response in a secure connection is not defensiveness, but clarification. They explain, they reassure, and they try to rebuild comfort. There is openness instead of pressure. But when this phrase is used repeatedly, especially in moments where there are valid concerns, it can create emotional imbalance. It can make you feel guilty for even asking questions. Instead of receiving clarity, you start questioning yourself. You wonder if you are being unfair, too sensitive, or difficult. Slowly, your voice becomes smaller and your doubts become heavier inside your own mind. What makes this phrase powerful is how it can reverse roles in a conversation. The person who raised the concern becomes the one being questioned. The original issue gets pushed aside, and now the focus is on proving trust instead of understanding truth. That shift can prevent real communication from happening, but trust cannot grow under pressure. It cannot be forced through guilt or emotional discomfort. It grows when actions and words stay aligned over time. When there is transparency, consistency, and emotional availability, trust becomes natural, not something that needs to be constantly defended. You also have to understand that questioning is not the same as disrespect. Asking for clarity does not mean you don't trust someone. It means you care enough to understand. In strong relationships, both people should feel safe enough to ask questions without fear of emotional punishment or manipulation. Not what you think is a phrase that often appears when clarity is needed the most. Yet instead of bringing peace, it can sometimes create even more confusion. On the surface, it sounds like reassurance. It sounds like an attempt to calm your worries and tell you that your concerns are misplaced. But what truly matters is what comes after that sentence, because sometimes it ends there without any real explanation, detail, or effort to make things clear. In a healthy relationship, when misunderstandings arise, the response is not vague dismissal. It is open communication. A person who values trust will take the time to explain what is happening, even if the situation is uncomfortable. They understand that clarity builds connection, while silence or half explanations build doubt. Reassurance is not just words. It is the willingness to be transparent when it matters most. But when it's not what you think is used without further explanation, it can leave you stuck in uncertainty. Your mind starts filling in the gaps because human nature does not handle unanswered questions well. You start replaying conversations, analyzing behavior, and trying to connect dots that were never clearly explained. And in that mental space, anxiety grows faster than truth. What makes this phrase even more complicated is when it becomes repetitive. If every concern is met with vague denial but no real clarity, it stops feeling like reassurance and starts feeling like avoidance. At that point, the issue is no longer just misunderstanding. It becomes lack of openness. And without openness, trust becomes difficult to maintain. You should always pay attention to how someone makes you feel after explaining themselves. Do you feel calmer or more confused? Do you feel included in the truth or kept outside of it? Because real honesty does not leave room for endless guessing. It brings things into the light so both people can understand each other fully. In the end, trust is not built on phrases alone. It is built on clarity, consistency, and emotional responsibility. When words and actions align, there is peace. When they don't, confusion becomes a quiet warning that should not be ignored.